Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of In the Pit with your host, Lobo Tigre. Our victim of the day is Stefan, something unpronounceable, but it sounds really good. His company is Kirkland Lake Discoveries in a storied part of the world for gold hunters. Stefan, I've got a lot of questions for you, but why don't you go ahead and give us an overview of what your company is doing, and then we'll dig right in.
Perfect. Thanks for having me, Lobo. I'm happy to be here. So Kirkland Lake Discoveries is a Explore Co. up in Kirkland Lake, Ontario. We have a 400-kilometer squared or 40,000 hectare land package. The whole thesis behind it is the Blake River rocks, which are on the Quebec side of the border, are very well endowed, VMS type deposits, as well as lode gold along the borders. And so over the last 8 years, we've accumulated this massive land package with the intention of exploring it to try to find, the next elephant, but on the Ontario side.
Well, that was remarkably pithy. Points for that. Okay. So who are you and why are you the right people to make this discovery? I've never heard of you before. Obviously, you are old enough to shave, but you don't look like, one of these industry veterans we like to bet on. So
No, exactly. I'm definitely fresh to the industry. So I've been in mineral exploration for the last 5 years. In 2020, during COVID, the business that I was operating basically got shut down with all the regulations and stop orders, et cetera. And so for me, I was looking abroad to go, okay, well, what interests me? And I've been an investor in the mining space for quite a few years. Had a very weak understanding of it, but at the same time, it was something that I was passionate about. And so I ended up starting at the bottom with a company called Goldspot, which was an AI exploration consultancy company, and basically worked with them to work on their marketing and a few other things. And from that, I got to learn the ropes of mineral exploration. So I got to work with some of the best structural geologists, geochemists, geophysicists, et cetera, to really get an understanding of how exploration works. From there, Earth Labs was formed, which rolled out Goldspot Discoveries to ALS Geochemics for $30 million. With that, I ended up working with the chief investment officer to do a little bit more analysis behind the scenes for investments and got to see that side of things. And then they made an investment in Kirkland Lake Discoveries. And at that point in time, they asked if I would come on to help out from the corporate development side of things, which I happily accepted and worked with Danielle Spethman, who was the CEO for a year when we were together. She retired in May of last year, and that was when they asked if I would step into the interim CEO role. And the board was happy with the performance and asked me to go full-time in October.
okay, so as it happens, I interviewed Denis Laviolette back in the day, the Goldspot days, so I'm familiar with the
Nice.
story.
Awesome.
I got to say, a lot of the promise and hope didn't seem to materialize. He was threatening my job. Not just looking for discoveries and spotting where to put the drill rig, but they were actually looking to apply the AI to stock picking, as I recall, and somehow that didn't materialize. So,
No, the
going to make the
quantitative
discovery for
analysis
you?
never came
Is
to
it an
be.
AI or is a geologist? It's not going to be you. Who's going to help you make your discovery?
You got it. So I have a team of two senior geos, Mike Kilborn, Drake Hyden. Mike's been in the industry for 50 years, worked in the Abitibi in any project you can imagine. He's logged over 20,000 kilometers of core. So he's done a lot of work in the Abitibi, and so having his expertise is one of the most valuable assets. And then Drake Hyden's my younger guy, who's more of the technology focused, because if I ask Mike to plot a map, it will never happen in QGIS. And so Drake's the guy that will take those things and make them into a format that we can actually use in the time frame that we're in. And then the board is all geologists. So I have Christina McCarthy, Vincent Dubé-Bourgeois, Gary Nassif, and then Denis Laviolette. And so they weigh in on our geological decisions to help format that exploration thesis, as well as drill hole targeting, et cetera. But the guys that are doing the heavy lifting are Mike Kilborn and Drake Hyden.
Okay, human intelligence. I'm all in favor of that. But you do mention AI in presentation. Are you still using some of these tools? If so, for what?
Yeah, so with my time with Goldspot, I got to see what worked and what didn't work. And one of the tools that always fascinated me was their smart match technology. And so basically, what they would do is they would take line data from whatever survey, whether it be magnetics or EM or et cetera, and they can pull out the signature that would happen over a deposit at a different part of the country or within that belt or whatever it may be, and then apply that signal to the rest of the line data and basically automatically pull it all out the other anomalies. And so each of these anomalies would then be truthed by a geophysicist, in this case, Brenda Sharp, who has, again, a lifetime of experience in EM data. And so we used that same smart match technology to cover basically the entire Blake River rock on the Ontario side of the border to pull out any anomalies that would match up with existing mineralization that's already been found. And so that gave us a lot of different targets to start working with.
Okay. Sorry, just quick side question. Of course, I mean, there's clearly a lot of Goldspot connection here. Is there an actual corporate inheritance? Do people who had shares in Spot back in the day, are they your shareholders now, or do they have to take that all on?
Earth Labs is an investor in Kirkland Lake Discoveries. So that's the only connection. Because of my experience working with them and the quality of work that I've seen them do, that's primarily the reason that we've continued working with them, because they're, like I said, they're excellent geophysicists, and their use of AI, from what I've seen, works really well for very particular methods, or if there's an abundance of data. And so with this, we were able to use publicly available data from surveys that were flown by the OGS, or Ontario government, and then use that data for our advantage.
All right. And just one last point on this. Spot was sold to ALS. And so do you pay ALS to use this, or did you keep a copy of the software in your back pocket? You have your own?
I wish it was something that I could keep in my back pocket. No, it was something that we paid ALS to do. It was about a 3-month project where they took basically all this data, and then any other publicly available data, anything else that we were able to feed into it. Because we're such an early stage ExploreCo, we don't have this multitude of data that's able to run, an efficient AI model to predict exactly where mineralization could be and why. It's more so to take 400 kilometers squared and make it into bite-sized pieces and targets to really focus on. So they certainly didn't tell us this is exactly where you're going to find this next massive deposit, but what they did is take it and go, okay, this is now smaller. This is a really interesting area. This would be a high priority. And so we ended up coming up with 67 targets across the entire area, but they're split up into really high likelihood, medium likelihood, and this is interesting. Maybe go check it out.
All right. So let's talk about that land package. Huge tracts of land.
Huge.
But it's around and in between existing mines. One would think at this stage of the game, picked over, why should we have any hope for these huge tracts of land when others have passed them by?
Yeah, that's a great question. And they've been explored, and in certain areas there's been more focus. Because of the proximity to the Kirkland Lake camp, it's in previous times has been explored almost exclusively for lode gold, and so it's all structure based. Proximity to the Kirkland Lake main break, where the majority of those mines are. And so that's how it was approached. And that's how the previous CEO had approached this in the Goodfish Piranha project. They were drilling out a zone that had narrow width, really high grade gold. But for us, we just didn't see the economics adding up that this could be turned into a mine in the long term. And so that's where we shifted our focus more to focus on those Blake River rocks, and focusing away from necessarily the large structures in the camp, the Larder Lake and the Duster Porcupine, but focusing more around intrusions and other things that would bring in, VMS or intrusion related mineralization, where that hasn't really been a big focus of people exploring on the Ontario side. There is cover there. There's more cover on the Ontario side than there is on the Quebec side. And so it makes it one of those things where it's a disadvantage, but that's one of the reasons that hasn't been found up to this point in time.
I understand what you're saying. That is interesting. I'm thinking if you really do have VMS, maybe gravity would work there better.
So the gravity surveys that have been done in the past, there's a massive gravity anomaly on the west side of the border where we're interested in, but it's so broad and almost ridiculous how big it is, that you would have to exactly do a tighter spaced, more higher resolution gravity survey. But yes, definitely something that's on our list.
Magnetite, who knows? All right, so I noticed, again, I've got your presentation here. I'm looking at this, and at West Kirkland, you've got these highlights slide, and there's grab samples, all this stuff, and then there's a bunch of things that have grades and thicknesses. Is that in a blow up circle there? Is that drilling, or are those trenches, or where are we at with targeting here?
So
that's your number one target this year.
So that's not our number one target. That's the
Okay.
Goodfish Corona. So that's the stuff that's been previously worked on, and that's the historic, high grade gold over those narrow widths. It's still very interesting to us. It's still within the Blake River rocks, but it's one of those things where we're trying to catch an elephant. We're trying to get something bigger, that has the potential to turn into a mine in the short term future, rather than something that will take 100,000 meters of drilling to drill out with this narrow grade stuff. There's definitely something there. There's beautiful high grade, 561 grams per ton over half meter is impressive. It's just with that style of mineralization, it takes so much drilling in the company where it is. We need something that's more tangible and easier to see the path to production. This is something where this might be a joint venture of the future, or have somebody come in to do that type of funding that's really interested in that style of mineralization. But for where we are, it's not our current focus.
Yeah. Since those are drill holes, I can certainly see why. We've got meter, sub-meter intervals, and a couple of thicker ones, but over 5 kilometers, that's a lot of variability over that area. Okay, so
exactly.
Walk me through then. What's the new target? What are the deliverables this year? You've got, I understand, 3,000 meters of drilling plan. That's not enough to drill anything up, but maybe proof of concept. What is the concept you're trying to prove?
Exactly. So what we did last year, again, one of the things that we talked about was getting our land package into more manageable bite-sized pieces. One of the ways that we did that was using geochemistry across the west side, where we had very little data density.
So this is a west side story?
This is a west side story.
All right. Carry on.
So we did B horizon soil sampling over the west side using a quaternary map. Basically figured out this is where these are going to work on this side, and covered as much as we possibly could. We then had Stephen Cook, who's a brilliant geochemist, take a look at the data and basically link them together based off of Pathfinder elements. And so it would take 5 or 6 different Pathfinder elements, put them together, and then create targets based off of that. And so what we noticed was that surrounding this intrusion on the west side, this Winnie Lake intrusion, there were pockets of these anomalies. So up to the 90th percentile for, if you're looking at VMS or you're looking at intrusion related, or again, low gold, that would cluster around in different pockets. And so found it interesting, explored it further, and that was where.
Sorry, is that slide? What, I don't see a number here. The next slide on your presentation with the pink thing and these ovals around it. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, exactly. So slide 9, I think. Yeah, and so the dark purple there that you'd be looking at is the shear or load gold. Basically, that's just anything that had elevated gold. It could still be VMS. It was just that the pathfinders were more towards low gold. Green would be that VMS, and then orange would be that intrusion related. And so the pockets, when we analyzed them a little bit further, we noticed that they were aligning with the magnetic highs that were surrounding the intrusion as well. And so we started looking at the hypothesis that this intrusion could have potentially remobilized that mineralization to the periphery of it, not necessarily driving the mineralization event. That wasn't what we had thought. but more so that was existing VMS that had basically shifted or moved to the periphery and then collected in structures that were potentially around that intrusion as it came in. For the longest time, we were always told, the intrusion it's tombstone granite. It's nothing to be interested in. And so it was always avoided. It wasn't one of those things, that we deeply explored. And then when we started looking closer, there were drill holes that had gone into it, and that's where we found the Winnie Lake work that was done by Glenn Mullen and Valdor Mining now. Back in the day, it was Golden Valley Mines, and they encountered 2.6% copper, 2.8% zinc, silver, and a gram per ton gold over 22.5 meters. So it was enough that it got us really interested that, okay, so maybe this could be the case. We're not 100% sure, but at the same time, it's starting to put some pieces together that makes this hypothesis a little bit more sound. And then again, looking at the broader scale, find more and more VMS, polymetallic, either drill holes or grab samples around, especially that southwestern corner of that intrusion. So for us, the thought process was, if we can take a look at that drill core, run some tests on it, this would help us to have a better understanding of what's going on. If we can look at it and go, what is the alteration signature? Is this more towards an intrusion, or is this truly a VMS? What are we looking at? And so I reached out to Glenn to talk to him about that property. He had basically said that there's been work done on it in the 90s. It's very interesting, but we haven't touched it since 2005. And so I
do remember Golden Valley Minerals, by the way, and I visited with Glenn, but I remember his focus was very much Quebec at the time.
Exactly. It always seemed to be this side project that was getting some work done. And, obviously this drill hole came out, a lot of interest came in. They drilled it as if it was just a VMS. And so they drilled under it, drilled to the east, away from the intrusion along the structure, and didn't find what they were looking for. And so back to talking to Glenn, we ended up optioning the property for worked out to be about $75,000 worth of shares, and a 2% royalty that then requires X amount of work, which is about 4 million, 1.4 million over 4 years. And that allowed us to get access to that core and to run some tests on it. The unfortunate part is that the core right now is in the core library in Swastika in Northern Ontario, and that building is under construction right now. So we haven't gotten access to it yet, but what we did get access to was the actual site. And there's lots of interesting stuff going on there.
I noticed how carefully you pronounced that name of that town, but all right. So have you already sighted the holes for this 3,000 meters of drilling? I mean, I kind of hear, the concept I'm hearing is still kind of vague. We're still trying to figure out what we've got here. So how do you drill on that basis? And when do you drill, or do you wait to have access to this core and do more surface work or lab work first, or where are we at in the process?
So we had already permitted around the Winnie Lake intrusion with the geophysical targets and the geochem targets as kind of the guide. They haven't been necessarily pinpointed, okay, let's test this exactly in this way. That's the current activities that we're working through, and our everyday discussions are centered around that. When we got the 3D model, put together the 3D model for the Winnie Lake, we saw a big gap in how they drilled it. And like I said, they went primarily to the east of the intrusion rather than towards it, which we think drove the mineralization. And so that one was an easy one to pick out exactly how we're going to drill that. Since we acquired the property, the guys were already on site and have been there, and they identified that there's a magnetite band that's attached to the mineralization. So basically you have magnetite up front, and then you have massive sulfides attached to it, or anywhere from 1 to 7 meters kind of on the border of it. And so we were able to fly drone magnetics, which really gave us a high resolution in that area to see how else could we target this undercover, with that magnetite popping out, and then the low right beside it with the sulfides. And so the Winning Lake area, we have identified of exactly how we want to drill it. The broader regional targets to test this hypothesis are, they're punts. They're realistically, they're going to be more of a science project to see if this is going to make sense, so that we can then go back to the till being like, we have 14 kilometers around this thing that are mineralized and exciting. Let's try to actually drill this out effectively and properly, do some more surveys that will help us to fine tune our thesis better. The gravity, like you're talking about, those types of things. So yeah, we have 3,000 meters. The drill permit for the Winning Lake area was put in basically as soon as we got the property. We'll have those in hand by the 5th of July, I'm told. We have strong partnerships with all of our First Nation groups. And so we worked all of those things out over the last 6 months, which means we don't have any roadblocks from that regard. And so it's just a matter of waiting for the government to do their 30-day window so that we can get it back and get drilling.
All right. Okay. So, and what's the budget for that, and how much do you have in the bank?
So we have 1.5 million in the bank. Half of that is our flow through dollars. So about 850,000 is flow through. I've put aside,
Which to your audience means it has to go into the ground.
Correct. Yes. So our wonderful shareholders, in our last raise basically said, we want you to test this thesis. Here's some money. We're going to get a tax break. It has to be used for exploration. So the total meterage we're expecting to be about 3,000. There is some money that's going to need to go towards access, so it will be on top of the drilling costs. But in the past, when we've been drilling, it's been anywhere between $150 and $250 a meter, depending on assays, that sort of thing. If you're assaying the whole thing, it's going to be closer to that $250. If you're assaying less, which in this case, it's pretty clear when you need to do the assays because of those massive sulfides, we're expecting it to be on that lower end. So the actual cost for drilling is anywhere from $300,000 to $400,000 is what we're looking at right now.
All right. So, if you happen to get, a smoking hot hole and the stock doubles, you can raise some more money and go after it some more. But, you could have, from this sort of target that, the odds of that are probably not high. It would be a terrific success for you if you just figure out the geology. If you said, aha, our thesis of this VMS mineralization being removed or remobilized by the intrusive, it's works, it's predictive. Now we know where to go. So technical success, but without that smoking hot drill hole, the stock's unlikely to be very rewarding for you. The market's not likely to get too excited.
Welcome to my world.
Right. So
that's the
but then you'll be low on cash and you're already in penny stock hell. So what do? Are those wonderful shareholders wonderful enough to to keep giving you money at those prices? Or sorry, you understand what I'm saying? Technical 100%, success here would actually be meaningful, but hard to fund going forward.
Bingo, exactly. And so that's the challenge of where we are, and the love that our stock has gotten. We haven't done a ton of marketing over the last 5 years, and the story is extremely different from what it is, or what it was, I should say. And so we're doing things very, very differently. So yes, there is the challenge that we are in penny stock hell and that we don't have unlimited funds. The people who are backing us will continue to do so. I personally don't want to dilute the company if we can avoid it. And so getting into a better valuation by having a drill hole will allow us to, go back to the till at a better price. Which is the hope and the goal. So exactly like you've said, more science needs to be done here to prove this hypothesis.
If you double, you're still in penny stock hell. Sorry.
But it's a better spot than we are right now, Lobo.
Yeah. Even a gold spot. Okay. I know. All right. But I guess long and short is you have some diehard shareholders who told you that they're with you, and if they're satisfied with results, they'll be in the next round.
Yes.
And then hopefully you bootstrap yourself up to a less dilutive level for future financing.
Exactly.
How many shares do you have out right now? What's the spread to fully diluted?
So 112 million shares out. I want to get the exact numbers for you, so I'm not bullshitting. Yeah, so 112 million shares out. With that, we have about 16 million warrants and 8.3 million options. So
Okay,
fully
so it's
diluted.
not Australian levels of dilution yet. There's still a little wiggle room there. Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
there's definitely still wiggle room. When we did a transaction with Newfound Gold, or I should say, Warrior Gold did a transaction with Newfound Gold 2 and a bit years ago, where they did a rollback at that point in time, and so that's been done. So the share structure is relatively tight. It's probably about 45 to 50% float. With a lot of strong shareholders. Like we have Eric Sprott, we have Rob McEwen, Sean Rusin came in on our last raise.
I saw that.
John Embry.
Have you thought about taking it private?
Oh my God! If I had the money to do so, Lobo, I would definitely do that. So that we can just focus on the exploration in the best way
Because
possible.
like at this stage where you have a thesis, like you could actually make value adding might be too, you could actually make real progress, but in the public markets not get recognized for that. So that seems like the kind of story that would be best advanced private until you're at the stage where you're delivering the kind of results, predictably that the market would respond to. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to give you advice. It's just a thought that popped in my head.
These are definitely thoughts that I've had too, because it's one of those things where you're in a particular state, and so you do the best with the cards that you're dealt. And for me, my approach was, let's reduce as much expenditure as humanly possible. So if we can reduce all of our overhead and put all that money towards exploration and do really good work with that, then we have a better chance of coming out the other side. Because I think we have a really good land package and we have a good hypothesis as to how to go about this. But you're right in that the market does not give a shit if we do really good science. They care about drill holes and they care about big flashy numbers. And so it's trying to balance those two things to be able to do exactly that we can put out some good numbers while still doing good science, and still keeping enough money in the bank to keep the lights on for an extended period of time to allow our team to do the work that they're capable of doing.
All right. Well, so I guess I understand the main thesis and what we're looking to try to do this season. Is there anything else about the company? Is there any plan B or other property in the portfolio that we haven't talked about, or is this it?
This is our primary focus, but with 40,000 hectares, you have quite a bit of other land. We share a border with Agnico Eagle to the south of us. They're putting the Upper Beaver into production, which is it's a weird deposit. It's hard to describe, but basically it's an enigmatic intrusion related type of event that brought the mineralization in there. So we're a kilometer from their border, and so finding another similar type of deposit on that side is still a belief in that those things usually don't happen as a one-off, and so it's a matter of, again, it's still early stage, but there's definitely opportunity over there. So whether that be something like a joint venture or having a strategic investment, that's something that's still on the table and that we're still exploring, as well as looking at the Good Fish Corona project and looking at potentially taking that piece of it and getting external funding specifically just for that, and giving away parts of the project, percentages of the project, to be able to, somebody who's really interested in that style, and happy to take the time and the money to do so. Because again, it's a lot of drilling that's going to drill that out to the point where it could become an economic deposit.
Well, I mean, sorry, it's not just a lot of drilling. It's like, if there's something better there, if there's something consistent there, because you could find, multi-ounce over a meter, but it's not going to go anywhere, right? And then bulk grade, but over 10 meters, it's not going to go anywhere, right? Like you really need to find a consistent. So you could do a bunch of drilling and still just keep coming up with all these variable results that I guess the
Yeah.
good news is as an evil scum of the earth newsletter writer, I approve of your pivot away from such a difficult and variable target. Let somebody else blow their brains out on it. I like
Thank
that.
you. I appreciate that more than I can say.
Well, I mean, with getting the occasional high grade hit, you probably have some shareholders from the past who are like, what? High grade gold.
At our last AGM, I don't want to say I was attacked, but it was one of those things where it's like, what the hell are you doing? There's known mineralization there. You're an idiot. Why would you not target that? And I was like, well, if you wanted to start this into a mine, you don't have any capital that could potentially come back in any shape or form. Why would you continue drilling that out? You need to look, away from that particular area, go 400 meters to the northeast where there's no drill holes, there's cover everywhere, but there's still potential. There's still structures that are going through there. There's definitely opportunity there, but again, it's not something that I can blow my brains out over.
Well, maybe I'm just a contrarian wolf, but that sounds smart to me. So, all right. Final question, skin of the game. I always ask everybody this: if you want me or my audience to invest in your company, how much of your own hard-earned money have you put in?
So over the last year and a half, I've purchased 1 million shares myself. It's
on
not
the open market.
On the open market, yes. So it's not a huge amount of money, but like you said, I'm just a young pup in this game, and I don't necessarily have the multi-millions to be able to put a lot into it. So, I'm holding close to 1% of the company, and as funds clear up and the opportunity arises, I certainly will continue to buy more.
Fair enough. Okay. Well, you've been a good sport with some fairly tough questions, so I'll let you have the last word if there's anything else you want to make sure the audience takes away from this.
This is a potential game changer. The exploration target that we have is again very different than what we've done in the past. Some of the mines on the Quebec side of the border are in the multi-million ounce style or size, where you have high grade gold and copper and zinc, and that's what we're chasing. Is another elephant, and we do believe that a single drill hole can change our story completely, to give us that opportunity to re-rate and really showcase what this land package has to offer.
All right, Stefan. Well, thank you very much. Good luck, and keep us posted.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your time, Lobo.
Thank you for watching this edition of In the Pit with Lobo Tigre. If you enjoyed or found value in what you just saw, and you're watching this on any sort of social media, please do hit the like button and the share link. Send this on to anybody you think might be interested. That helps us out a lot. If you're watching this on YouTube, please do hit the subscribe button as well. The number of subscribers helps us get more valuable content to you as well. On the subject of subscribing, I'll quickly say that if you're not a subscriber to our free weekly Speculators Digest, I encourage you to sign up. I promise if you do, we will not send you a flood of daily advertisements. You get one free weekly digest with original research not published anywhere else. Check it out at independentspeculator.com. Thank you and have a great day.